Hi, my name is Vaughan Smith. I'm a potter in Nova Scotia, and I'm attempting to make a video of me throwing some little cylinder coffee mugs. I've lived in Nova Scotia for 9 years this January. We moved here from Ohio to New York and then to Nova Scotia. I'm originally from England. I was a fine art graduate from Bowyer Ashton Bristol Polytechnic back in the 1970s. I'm now in my, really about 40 years of doing pottery. I'm going to try and do a whole range of videos to help my classes that I teach in my studio here. I have about 16 to 18 students who do classes throughout the winter months, hand building and also throwing on the potter's wheel. So I thought it would be nice if I could film the videos of the demos and see how that works out, if it helps them or not. This is just the basic cylinder coffee mug, which is a must-do exercise if you really want to learn how to throw on the potter's wheel. I started off in high school doing pottery, and my teacher instructed us to throw 100 cylinders. It was a good exercise. I was at high school in Penistone in Yorkshire a long time ago. This clay body is B-Mix from Laguna in Ohio. I've used this clay since the 1980s. It's always been a really good cone 5 low stoneware basically. It will go up higher. I try to keep it at cone 5, it seems to work better there. Although I fired it at cone 6 successfully, but it seems like it likes cone 5. There you go, your basic cylinder. Alright, so how did I do that? First of all, you've got to make sure your wheel is totally clean. The first piece you throw, the wheel will have no clay left on it. So you sponge the clay off the wheel, making sure that it's no running water at all on there. The clay should be dry as well, so that there's moisture a little bit there that'll help it stick. And you bang it down. And as a beginner, you should try and make sure these are as rounded as possible before you actually try to spin the wheel. Alright, your hands have to be really wet when you're throwing. So dip both hands in the water, place your hand right on the top to actually seal the clay to the surface. Then wet it again. Put your left hand with your body tucked right against the wheel, thighs against the wheel splash pan, and your foot solidly on the actual speed control, so it only takes a little toe or heel action and you can slow or speed the wheel up. So pull your body right up to the wheel, head should be right over the piece, both hands should be wet, top hand down first, side hand in, and press with your elbows leaning on your thighs. Sometimes it helps to put a brick underneath your feet that lifts up your thighs a little bit, but basically you push down with your top hand, in with your left hand, and try and do that several times and move the clay around. Push enough pressure on so you can see the clay go up, down, and you get it really sealed on the wheel head, and then try and center it, which means stop it wobbling. Now, the positioning of the hands is crucial. I touch the clay with that whole area, and the same on this hand. My hands are not flat, they're actually curved, so this hand is curved around that way and this hand is curved over the top, so my little finger is going across the top of the clay and my heel of the hand is pushing in from the edge there to catch the corner bit that's spinning around. This hand rests on the wheel itself, so it can't be wobbling up and down, and then this thumb is across the other one to try and make the hands work together. So you're really trying to make sure the clay cannot escape anywhere. So if it's off center like that, you apply the pressure and you push down, and when you feel like it stops wobbling, you let go slowly. Count to 3 if you are a beginner, because sometimes it's hard to judge. When you let go a little bit too fast, it'll go off center again. Okay, once you've got it centered, keep your hands solidly on your thighs, wet the center area a little bit, and if you're a beginner, you should probably dribble a little water in there so you know you've got plenty of water to go down, and then push down. See how my fingers on my right hand are resting on my left hand, and you open it up, just go towards your other hand and let go slowly. It's nice to actually compress that clay a little bit in the bottom to make sure that it's not going to get any little, what we call S-cracks. So you opened it up this way, so I push my finger from the outer wall there and push it towards the center, and then let go slowly in the center, and it compresses the clay down. Fill that full of water again so you know it's not going to dry out. Now, if you push with these two fingers alone and go in, there's no control from the inside, but the clay will still grow in height a little bit because you're narrowing it. And if you actually did the opposite with these two fingers, you can make it get wider again. But it really doesn't grow or change that much because there's no pressure with the fingers together that forces the clay above your fingers. So basically, if you put two fingers on the inside, two fingers on the outside, the bottom fingers are a little bit lower down, and apply pressure with both fingers on both hands, and a little bit more pressure on the outside fingers, and the wall of the pot will rise up. If I was pressing hard with these fingers, it would have got wider. So you want to make sure that's balanced well so that you don't get wider at this point, because you're trying to keep the pot under control. So two fingers, two fingers. These ones will be a little bit lower down because these ones are sitting on the floor of the pot on the inside, which is about 1/2 to 1 centimeter thick. Okay, fingertips again. Press in with the outside fingers, and make sure every revolution you're a little bit higher up on the pot, because the water is above your fingers. As soon as you touch it and go one revolution, the water is dragged off the pot by your fingers. So that's an important speed control thing. The wheel has now been slowed down a little bit too. The bigger the pot gets, the slower the wheel should be. And if you dribble water right on the rim, so it dribbles inside and outside, you know you've covered all the bases with the drip, so it's evenly wet everywhere. Now, I don't need to do usually more than 2 pulls. You may take 2 or 3 pulls to get this high, but basically 2 pulls for me is enough. I have a rib, wooden rib, which I press underneath there. That allows my wire later to cut through. The other end of the rib, I press just above that, so it gives my foot, the pot has a nice little foot to sit on, so you don't have to do much trimming if you do that. Dribble water on the inside again, so my hand can go in there without getting stuck to the clay. The water lubricates it, and then push this metal rib with your inside fingers just against the edge of the metal rib. The rib is perpendicular to the wall of the pot, and it straightens the entire wall to give you a nice cylinder. Remember I said cylinders, and I had to throw 100 when I was 17 years old to learn how to throw, so it's a good practice when you're learning to throw to make a lot of cylinders and keep them as even as possible. The sponge on a stick is to get the water out of the inside. Make sure that you don't leave any in there because it will soften the pot down on the floor on the inside. Now make sure that you also clean your rim up. A lot of potters will use a leather, some will use a sponge. I use this, and then I have a device I made myself that I can actually compress the rim. So let me wet the rubber band. This is a Laguna Clay Company rubber band which I've made on a tool, that if I do that I can compress the rim down a little bit. It's kind of like between a sponge and a leather. Alright, take a look at it, make sure that everything is just right, and then you cut it off again. Dribble water. My wheel drains to the front, so I try to dribble the water from behind. And usually 1 or 2 pulls will get it off. When you're more experienced, you can keep the wheel spinning wheel spinning as you're cutting off. And then you place the pot onto another bat. So you don't have to change bats all the time. I made these bats myself. They're actually white plastic bats from a material they use in ice hockey rinks to actually stop the ice hockey guys from hurting themselves. Okay, now I leave a bit of clay on the wheel because it helps this piece to stick. So make sure no water gets between the surfaces. Bang down, hit 2 or 3 times, round it off as much as you can because as a beginner you won't be able to center it from a square to a round very easily. Alright, one more time. It's solid. Dip your right hand in and press down to make sure it really is stuck to the wheel. And then wet both hands, thighs tucked in, elbows on thighs, and push with your left hand riding on the wheel head and push down and sideways in as well. Make sure it moves around, pressing down, pushing in. You know you've got some strength to move the clay, so then you can go for the center and let go slowly. The clay shouldn't be able to escape. See, that whole part of my hand is dragging on the clay surface. I can see half the pot or the ball of clay as I'm throwing, so I can see whether it's wobbling or not, but you can also feel it. Some potters will do the centering like that. I like to see what I'm doing, so I center with half the piece visible. Alright, this hand stays where it is, as if I was centering. Finger and thumb on that left hand, and I just make a dimple. When you're learning to throw, you should fill that full of water before you go for it. Dribble it, fill it with some water, and then push down to about just under 1 centimeter from the floor, and pull out. And it should all be done while the pot is really wet. If it starts to dry out, it means you didn't have enough water or you're going too slow. And then flatten the base. And a little trick is, back of this fingernail, sometimes I push it into the wall over there so it gives these 2 fingers somewhere to go underneath. Dribble the water on the actual piece. Now more pressure in from the right hand. You press in, back pressure with a little bit from the inside, but most of the pressure is with those 2 fingers on the outside. And every revolution you should be 1 little bit higher up, so the water above your fingers is what you're chasing, and it dries out underneath, but it's always watery above. So every revolution you should be a little higher to keep up with that water. 2 fingers again. Press in with the outside fingers and pull the wall up. Every revolution, the wheel's a bit slower now, but I'm chasing that wet spot right above my fingers till you get right to the top of the rim. Put a little back pressure on the very edge of the rim just to compress it a little bit. The lips are going to be on that rim, so you want to keep a nice rounded edge there. And then wet hand all the way in. Use the rib. Press against the edge of the rib. It gives you a really nice cylinder. And then let go as you get to the top. And then I'm using the wooden rib last. You can do this before the rib if you want, but I just do it either way. You make a foot, turn the rib around, push in again, it gives you that nice edge. And then use a leather, a sponge, or whatever you feel like makes that rim smooth. Press down, round your rim off basically. Take a look, make sure you've got no horrible messes anywhere. Dry out the base a little bit, and even just make so sure there's no water left at the top. Well, I didn't get the water out of the center, so suck all the water out from down there. I've already sponged the rim, so you don't want to get any more on there. If you do, you just use the leather or whatever you're using to smooth the rim and just let go slowly, and that's the piece again. Dribble water around the bottom of the pot, and if you're really careful, you can keep the wheel spinning, and it should release the piece, and as soon as it's released, you pull to the edge, and you can pull it off. There you go. So, my name is Vaughan Smith. I live in Nova Scotia on the South Shore, a little bit of paradise, except for the big snowstorm coming this weekend. and I will try and do more videos as I do different classes. Thank you very much for spending some time with me.